What's trending today in America? Assault and battery in Kansas, shooter in a hospital in Atlanta, shooter in a neighborhood in Texas, shooter in an elementary school in Serbia. That's what's trending. And what's our response? We learn Torah because that's the way to bring God into this world, to bring peace and safety and security. This world's not a jungle. We want to reveal it for what it is, God's own. So today is the day when we see what you need to do to test if this person's a sincere convert or not. Meaning at this moment, we don't know. I mean, we know because we know the story. We know this is one of the books of scriptures of Tanakh. This happened a long time ago. But if you're Naomi, possibly the mother-in-law, possibly not the mother-in-law of these two women. Now, again, I say girls. They weren't girls. Ruth was 40 at the time. You know, sometimes if you see the pictures, this beautiful young girl, I'm sure she was beautiful because she was perfect. And if you're perfect spiritually, you must be perfect physically as well. But she was a beautiful 40-year-old woman at this moment. And Arpa maybe was around the same age. And this is the test. 10 years before, when they converted, were they sincere? We don't know. Well, they lived like Jews for 10 years. So what? They were obedient wives. This was what their husband wanted. If their husband wanted them to burn incense to idols, maybe they'd been burning incense to idols. Their husbands wanted them to do these rituals instead called Sabbath and kosher. And okay, so that's what they did. We don't know. We don't know. Is it all for their husbands or not? That's what is found out today, chapter 1, verse 8. So looking inside. So the last verse we read, verse 7 of chapter 1. Remember, there's only 4 chapters. It's a short book. She left the place where she had been. She means Naomi. Left the place of Moab, accompanied by her 2 daughter-in-laws, which again, the fact that the scripture calls them daughter-in-laws implies they weren't Jewish. Because obviously, if you're married to a non-Jewish woman, that non-Jewish woman isn't your wife in any real sense, and therefore obviously not your mother's daughter-in-law. Maybe they are viewed as Jewish. And they set out on the road to return to the land of Judah. So Naomi's walking. Now, again, Naomi's old. She's been through an awful lot. Has she suffered these past 10 years? She was a very righteous woman. The pain she felt in following her husband and abandoning the Jewish people, that was very deep. The pain she felt in going to the land of the end and then losing her husband, who, as we said, was really only a loss to her and her sons, because for the Jewish people, he was already dead. And then seeing her sons marry these Moabite princesses, you know, like, didn't make her feel too good. And then seeing them childless for 10 years. And then losing all their money somehow in the process. We don't know the details, but they came enormously wealthy. And they left so poor, they were like barefoot. They were like the poorest of the poor. They were beggars. And now she's going back home. When she left it 10 years ago, again, she was like the richest woman of the country, married to a man of illustrious lineage, with 2 upstanding sons. And now she's a nothing. She's a nobody, no husband, no kids, no grandkids, no money. And these 2 women are going with her. And that made her, like, on many levels, uncomfortable. So obviously, when her sons first got married, she was uncomfortable because what are they marrying these Moabite girls for? Well, we converted them. What is that? But then for 10 years, they were nice women and respectful to their mother-in-law and respectful to their husband. So she sort of got accustomed to them. And now they're walking her, and in her thoughts, okay, they're being nice and respectful. And they're walking her to the crossroads and saying goodbye to her. Nobody else in Moab could care less. She had no money anymore. She was meaningless to everyone. And she's going to walk herself back to the land of the Jewish people. But when they got to the crossroads, these 2 women kept walking. And then she's thinking, oh my, they're coming back with me. And that made her very uncomfortable. I mean, not only is she super embarrassed, disgraced, a nothing, a nobody, but and she used to be a somebody. So when you're a nobody, you used to be a somebody. It hurts even more to be a nobody. But now she's a nobody, widow, no children, not a penny, with 2 Moabite daughter-in-laws. What does she do with it? And now she asks, are they really Jewish or not? So what she does, and she is the source, we know this is the law, but she is the source for it, is she discourages them from coming with her. As it says, then Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law. So again, the verse is saying daughters-in-law, which means, well, they had converted, but was it real or not? Go, return, each of you to her mother's house. God deal kindly with you if you have dealt kindly with the dead and with me. Meaning, you're wonderful girls. You're wonderful women. You were good wives. You were good daughter-in-laws. You deserve a good life. Go. Have a wonderful life. Don't come back with me. I have nothing for you, as she's going to say in a lot of detail. I have nothing for you. There's no point in you coming back with me. And in essence, I don't really know that I want you to come back with me, because how is everybody going to feel? Now, again, and this we did not explore, and I don't believe we're going to get to it today. God willing, it will probably be the first thing we discuss next week. This whole concept of Moab, Ammon, and can they convert or can't they convert? Or what does it mean a convert? But definitely at this time, there were no Moabite converts. Nobody was a convert from Moab. Moab was the enemy. Were they sincere converts? Naomi's thinking, I don't know. Are they really Jewish? I don't know. If they are Jewish, how's everyone going to look at them? They're from Moab. And they might even find out their princess is from Moab. They're the daughters of Eglon, that arch villain that hurt so many Jews. But of course, if they're Jewish, they should come back. But are they really Jewish? Was that conversion real? I don't know. I got to find out. And how she found out, which is how we've been finding out ever since, is by very strongly pushing them away. And if you look at the details of the verses, and we're not going to get so into the nuances, but three times she pushes them away. Go home, go away, go back. There's no reason to stay with me. I have nothing for you. And from there, we learn that if someone comes to us to convert, 3 times we have to dissuade them very strongly. So she continues and says, may God grant that you find security each in the home of her husband. Meaning, what do you come with me for? As she says, I don't have any other sons. I'm not going to have any more sons. If I do have more sons, you're not going to wait till they grow up. I've got nothing for you. Go back home. Which again, the implication is you're not Jewish. Because obviously, if someone's Jewish, you don't tell them, go back home to the idols, to the non-Jews, to the idolatrous ways that you have, thank God, not lived for the past 10 years. So by saying, go back home, go to your father's house, find some nice man to marry and build a nice home with, the assumption is, I'm not looking at you as Jews, I'm looking at you as non-Jews, and you were nice girls, nice women, nice wives, nice daughter-in-laws, and got nothing to do with you anymore. Go back home. She kissed them, and they raised their voices and wept. So when she's saying, go, 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 they start crying as if to say, no, we want to be with you. Now, the truth is, this was pretty impressive for both of them. Meaning, really, it did make no sense for them to go with her. They did have parents. They could have gone back, as Arpa chose to, and got married, as we know Arpa did, because Goliath was her descendant. They had a life. Going with Naomi to Israel, they were walking to not having a life. And as we get to that point in the story today, it wasn't a life they were used to. Again, they were both raised as princesses. What princesses means then is not, Disney World's version of it or the Queen of England's version of it, but it still meant something. It still was a princess for whatever that was worth in those days. They did have a home. They did have someone else that would have wanted to marry them. From their being princess, they were married to very wealthy men. So they grew up with wealth. They continued with wealth. And now there's nothing. Absolute poverty. So there was really no reason to go with Naomi. Like, you're going to Jews that don't like Moabite. You're going to a place of absolute poverty. You could go back home and have a normal life. There's no future here. What are you What are you doing this for? So the fact that Ruth and Arpa wanted to go with Naomi is really a testimony, you could say, to both of them, and obviously to Naomi. I mean, this is very different than the stereotype mother-in-law, daughter-in-law relationship here. They sincerely wanted to go with her. They sincerely had those feelings for her. So what did they say to her? And they said to her, no. And this both of them said. And we see throughout this storyline, until Ruth and Arpa split, it was like the two of them together. We don't see any differentiation. We don't see that Naomi favored Ruth over Arpa. You don't see in her responses that she was looking at Ruth and Arpa with a different light. And seemingly she wasn't. In her head, they were the same. They were two Moabite girls that, unfortunately, her sons married them instead of going back home and marrying good Jewish girls. But what could she do? Like a lot of times when your kids marry people that you're not so happy with, what can you do? You just are quiet and deal with it. And lo and behold, they were nice girls.
And they were good wives. And for 10 years, they've been good wives to their husbands and good daughter-in-laws to her. So there was an affection there for both of them equally. And both of them seemingly equally had a feeling for her. So they both respond and say, no, we will return with you to your people. Naomi doesn't accept. She's going to push them away again. But Naomi said, turn back, my daughter. Why should you come with me? Have I more sons in my womb who could become husbands to you? Like, I'm not married. If I was married, do you think at my age I'm going to have kids? And if I do have kids, she's going to say, you're going to wait till they grow old enough to get married to you? Turn back, my daughters. Go along, for I'm too old to have a husband. Even if I were, there's hope for me. Even if I were to say there's hope for me. And even if I were to have a husband tonight and even bear a son, would you wait for them until they were grown up? Would you tie yourselves down for them and not marry anyone else? No, my daughters, I'm very embittered on account of you, for the hand of God has gone forth against me. So she was really, really, really saying, it's wonderful, and no, there's no future with me. I've got nothing for you. I got no kids left. I'm not going to have any kids. You're not going to wait for the kids. There's nothing here. You're wonderful. It's so sweet. And go home. Go home, meaning go back. So again, the fact that she could be telling them this is really because if they go back, they were never Jewish in the first place. And if they don't go back, that proves that originally that conversion, even though it was so hand of God and neither of them obviously were looking for it, neither of them knew about Jews besides as the enemy, to want to be a Jew, if they don't go back, if they stay with her, that means that it always really was a sincere conversion. And for the past 10 years, they really, really were Jewish women, Jewish girls, Jewish women. So as we see, as we know, as the verse continues, they raised up their voices and wept again. Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. So Orpah's like, oh, like that good emotional cry, like, I feel so bad, but like, you're right. I mean, this is really stupid and pointless. And Ruth said, I'm not leaving you. This doesn't make any sense, but I'm not leaving you. And that really is what it means a true convert. A true convert makes no sense. It makes no sense to convert. You want to serve God? You want a relationship to God? Beautiful. Be a Noahide. Keep 7 laws nicely, well, beautifully, amazingly, and you can still have a very normal life. And you can still be part of your family and live your fairly like everyone else life and be a Noahide, and God is so happy with you. What in the world are you doing jumping ship, abandoning, separating, detaching yourself from everyone to become a Jew? And that's really a convert. It really makes no sense. And of course, historically, we've seen this again and again. I mean, sometimes not as obviously, and sometimes so obviously we're like, you want to be part of the Jews? like I'm thinking of a man during the Holocaust. He was actually a priest who realized the truth was in Judaism, and he wanted to convert during the Holocaust. And the Jewish rabbi said, please don't convert now. You're much more useful to us and beneficial to us as a non-Jew. After this is over, convert. But for now, please don't convert. We need you. We need you to. We need someone here that's safe. That makes no sense. That makes no sense. Right? Being a convert makes no sense. And that's why, as we said, the Talmud says, a convert who converts. Meaning, before you converted, there was this huge irrational spark in you pulling you to convert. And that's the ultimate reason you converted, no matter what window dressing went on around there. We discussed this 2 weeks ago, and afterwards Elisa shared with me some stories of people she knew of converts that just really fleshed out in a very real way this concept. And of course, it totally jived with converts I know and stories of people I know. And that's the story of the convert. And any one of you who knows any or many converts, it's always true. And some of them will tell you, from I was so young, I was obsessed with the Jewish people. I just wanted, and I didn't know any Jews, but I always knew I was a Jew. I always knew I wanted to be a Jew. Like, that makes no sense. True. So we see this here with Ruth, but this is the story of the convert. It made no sense. Go back home, no hard feelings. Your father will find you another shidduch. You're a Moabite princess. He'll find someone for you to marry, and maybe this time you'll have a child and you'll build a life. You're going to go back to Israel. No one's going to marry you. Who wants to marry a Moabite? And I've got 0. You're going to be the poorest of the poor. What are you doing this for? And Ruth is like, I don't know. I don't care. I'm not leaving you. That's the convert. And as I said, technically, if you remember the concept, when a convert converts after they emerge from that mikvah, they're like every regular Jew. They have a godly soul just like you and me. They have an animal soul just like you and me. And that enormous, huge spark of God that was compelling them to convert leaves them. And that's why sometimes after they convert, it's a much bigger stroll to serve God than before. They don't have the spark, and they've got an animal soul, and they've got an evil inclination, just like the rest of us. Until that point, they are literally compelled and propelled along their road, as we see. Now, Ruth's response. So she said, okay, so now Naomi's trying time 3 here, right? We said 3 times. This is now her 3rd time. Orpah got knocked off by time 2, but Ruth, she's going for the 3rd time. Look, your sister-in-law has returned to her people and to her God. Go follow your sister-in-law. Now, again, this all proves that Naomi really didn't know if they were Jewish or not. Because if they were Jewish, what in the world is she doing? She's telling the Jew to go back to the home of your father and be an idolater? Go follow your sister-in-law and be an idolater? Go to your father and he's going to find some idolatrous man for you to marry? But she didn't know. I don't know. Ruth, and again, we see this so clearly because Ruth and Orpah are seemingly the same story. They both came from the same home. They both went through the same conversion. They both lived 10 years faithfully as Jewish wives and as good daughter-in-laws. Will the real Jew emerge? Maybe both, maybe neither. We don't know. Naomi pushed away once. They still stayed. She pushed away a 2nd time. Orpah falls off and Ruth still stays. She's pushing away now a 3rd time. If Ruth goes through all 3 times, that means she always was a Jew. And that's why the rest of the story makes sense. But Ruth said, do not urge me to leave you, to turn back and not follow you. And of course, these are now the famous words, these immortal words that lots of non-Jews know. For wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people are my people. Your God is my God. Where you die, I will die. And there I will be buried. Then may God do to me and more, if anything but death separates me from you. When we're looking at this, again, it's beautiful and it's crazy. And she did it and she meant it sincerely. And Naomi stopped. That's why we learned 3, because Naomi pushed her 3 times. And then she stopped at this point. It wasn't like she's like, wow, that was so gorgeous. How could I push her away? It was like, no, Naomi knew. If she passed this test, she actually really is Jewish. Or in our world, if a convert passed that test, they're really sincere. I actually know a woman who did convert sincerely. And she told me, she was probably been in her 50s when she converted. And she told me again, like she was trying to remember like Jamaica or one of those islands. And she said like she always like somehow was fascinated with Jews. And when she was in maybe her 20s or early 30s, she wanted to convert. She went to the synagogue. They were so rude to her. She just left and said, forget it. They don't want me. I'm dark skinned. I'm this, I'm that. And then she said like 20 years later, someone told her, no, that's what they do. They push you away. So she said, this time I went back and I knew they were going to do that, but I just kept coming back. She knew the trick. She knew the ropes. So she kept coming back until they saw she was sincere. And then she spent about a year in the conversion process. And then she did convert and thank God moved to Israel and got married and nice, thank God. Nice life as a Jewish woman. What Ruth is doing is crazy. But what Ruth is doing, and I just was reflecting on this point as I was reading it, she did the best thing for herself possible. I just want to think about that for a minute and think about that in the context of the story here. You're looking, me and you, we're like behind the bushes watching this dialogue. And we're seeing this old woman. She had what probably used to be very nice clothes, but they're rags now. And we see this younger, like middle-aged woman, very beautiful 40-year-old woman, who also has nice clothes that looks a little dated and old. And we hear this conversation and we're like, she's crazy. We want to tell her, we want to jump in the story and say, you're crazy. What are you going with that lady for? You could see her clothing. She doesn't even have shoes on her feet. You come from a home, you come from a normal home, will they feed you? Will they give you shoes? Will you have a bed? Go back, you look like a nice girl. What are you messing yourself up for? But we're too polite to jump in, so we just watch this tragedy. And we don't know, and Ruth didn't know either, that she was acquiring for herself the best, of course, in spiritual reality, and the best in the physical world as well. We didn't know the end of her story. She didn't know the end of her story. Naomi didn't know the end of her story. When Naomi sees how stubbornly Ruth is saying, I'm a Jew, Naomi's like, okay, you're a Jew. Fine, let's go back. But Naomi's probably thinking, oh, yeah, I feel so bad for her. Man, me, I'm old. Okay, my life is gone, is finished. I'm a nothing. I'm a nobody. All right, listen, I'm an old lady. I lived. Her, I feel bad. And what was Ruth thinking? What type of life did she envision for herself? Going back to a country where she knew no one, where she knew people had a bad taste in their mouth for what Naomi's family had done, where she had nothing. What did she think was going to be her future? She didn't care. This is what I want. This is my God. These are my people. I don't care. But practically speaking, she was acquiring for herself the best life possible. She does get married. She does have a child. Who has a child? Who has a child? All of them were incredible tzaddikim, culminating in Yishai. I mean, really, all three of them were like unbelievably holy people who then had David HaMelech, King David, from whom we know is the line of kings forever, climaxing in Melech HaMashiach himself, the Redeemer. And she had the joy of living till an old age and seeing her son and his son and his son and his son, seeing the progeny, having the nachas, having these beautiful descendants flowering, all such good people living such good lives. So she actually had, in the physical sense, a very good life and an enormous significant stake in eternity. So when she made that choice, it seems like a crazy choice, a martyr choice. And it was not only on the spiritual plane, on the physical plane, it was a really good choice. And like a lot of times in life, that happens. Like sometimes we make choices, probably not as dramatic, but when we're making that better for God, but not too good for us choice, there's no such thing. We all have those choices sometimes, and it might seem like, what? We're going to do that? That doesn't make any sense. That's not leading us any place that we would want to be. But when you make the choice for God, it's not just like you're sacrificing and being the martyr and doing what's good for God, but really bad for you. It never works that way. You might not see it right away. You might not see it in a month. But ultimately, when you make that choice for God, it's the best choice for you spiritually. And it's the best choice for you as a person as well. And Ruth said, I'm done. It might not make any sense. What I'm doing just might be like, I don't know why, but I have no choice. I'm a Jew. And by her saying, I can't leave you. I can't leave you, no, even if you want me to leave you. She really was showing the truth that was true all along. That was true 10 years before. She always was a Jew. At that point, once Naomi sees, I pushed her away 3 times, and she stuck with me all 3 times, okay, that's it. And then Naomi's like, fine. Meaning, it's not like, well, Naomi's like, she could still be, she could be embarrassed. Not only am I going back 10 years older, minus a husband, minus 2 kids, minus all my money, I'm going back with a Moabite daughter-in-law. No. She was going back with the most wonderful woman in the world. She was going back with Ruth. So once Naomi knew, this isn't a Moabite woman that's coming with her. This is a Jewish woman, beautiful. And we see from this point, for the rest of the story, Naomi's absolute love for Ruth, and of course, Ruth's absolute love and devotion to Naomi, and the relationship between these two, like, wow, what a mother-in-law, what a daughter-in-law. That's what the relationship really should always be. But until this point, there was really no difference between Ruth and Orpah in Naomi's eyes. As we see, she treated them equal here. But of course, because of the choices, and this was the point I was trying to make, it became very different. It became like you almost see the diametric opposition. Orpah was like, yes, yes, yes. Pushed away once. Yes, yes, yes. Pushed away twice. All right, forget it. She goes off, gets married, and eventually has a descendant named Goliath. Ruth gets pushed away once, gets pushed away twice, gets pushed away a third time, sticks with Naomi, goes with her, gets married, and has a descendant named David Hamelech, King David. And when we have that meeting between David and Goliath from Ruth and Arpa and their choices, you make a choice like Ruth, you have a David, and you make a choice like Arpa, and you have a Goliath. And that's why their lives were so interlinked, interwoven from then till then. When she saw she was determined to go with her, she stopped arguing with her, right? From where we learn, if you push away the potential convert 3 times and they stick with you, that's it. You accept them and you work with them. And the 2 of them went on until they came to Beis Lechem, which of course was the original locale of Naomi in a very different way. And it came to pass, when they arrived in Beit Lechem, the whole city was tumultuous over them. And the women said, like, you feel everyone is talking about you? Well, this is Tanakh. This is scripture saying everyone was talking about them. Real deal, not in your mind. This really happened. Could this be Naomi? They're like, is this possible? Is this the woman that left us 10 years ago? She left us. Richest woman in the country. Such luxury, such a blessed life. Like, you look at some people and like, whoa, they have everything. Whoa, she has everything. We're all stuck with a famine. She's going off to comfort with her husband, with her sons, with all her wealth. What happened? No husbands, no sons, no wealth. She didn't even have shoes on her feet. Imagine how she aged. Imagine how she looked. This is Naomi. This is that magnificent lady. She looks like a shemata. She looks like the poorest beggar. She was like the poorest beggar. And she said, don't call me Naomi. Naomi means the pleasant one. No, that has not been my life. She replied, call me Mara. Mara, which is of course the root word for the name Miriam. Mara is mar, is bitter, embittered. For the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. So when she was looking at her life at that point, and she was a very virtuous person, but she did not foresee a good life in her future. She did not, what could happen now? Like, sometimes we have these situations in our life where like, okay, so what could happen? Like, I don't even have a fantasy of how God can make this work out. I can't even imagine. I don't even have like in my head what I could tell myself how this is going to be good. That's how Naomi felt. There's no storyline. There's nothing I'm hoping for. It's over. My husband's gone. My kids are gone. My money, if it will be any comfort, is gone. I've got nothing. What's going to be in the future? Nothing. What could be in the future? Nothing. That's how she felt. We sometimes might feel that about certain situations in our life. It's, as you say in the Yiddish, farfallen. It's finished. It's done. There's no hope. Nothing good could emerge. Trust God. God's far more creative. God's got his plans. God's running the show. She said, I was full when I went away. Full meaning full with all the blessings, full with a husband, full with children, full with wealth. I was full. My life was so good. And God has brought me back empty. Empty of a husband, empty of children, empty of financial resources. How can you call me Naomi? God has testified against me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. So you can see how she was really understanding her situation was like she was being punished. She saw her husband was punished. He died. Her sons were punished. They were childless and they died, and they lost all the money in the process. And now she's punished because she's got nothing. Like she's the survivor who's also being punished because what does she have? She didn't see that. No, God didn't look at her that way. God wasn't punishing her. This wasn't a punishment. And good is going to emerge. It's going to be good. It's going to be good. And we really have to sometimes in our lives, we can also sort of feel like, what could happen anyway? Like what could be? Trust God. Trust God. God has his ways. The fact that we can't even fathom or pretend or like speculate on what to hope for or fantasize for. Trust God. And so it was that Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabite, now here she's Jewish, but they're still calling her the Moabite because, again, in the story, the fact that she was a complete Jew, but a convert from Moab, has a lot of significance, as we'll discuss next week. Her daughter-in-law with her, who returned from the fields of Moab, they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. That was very, very significant. Now, on one hand, it's very significant because I'm saying she had nothing, she's so poor, she doesn't even have shoes. And you could say, wait a minute, Elimelech must have had land. He's the wealthiest man. We understand all of his commodities were gone, but he surely never sold his land. So they're not beggars that have nothing. They have all this land. I mean, he must have had land, which he did. So why didn't they just plant and have food? Well, it was the wrong time for that. They came at the time of the harvest. So you can't come at the time of the harvest and start planting your tomatoes or cucumbers or whatever. It doesn't work. It's the wrong season. So therefore, they had no food, even though they did have land, but they had no food and they had no money to buy food. And they did have this land that at the moment wasn't helping them at all, but hopefully would in the future. That land is a significant piece of the story. That's why I'm mentioning it. Now we're beginning chapter 2. I wanted to get to a certain point in chapter 2 today, so moving right along. Naomi had a relative through her husband, a man of substance, wealthy, important, from the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. So now we introduce Boaz. Boaz, so we know all about Naomi, we know all about Ruth, and now we're finding out about Boaz. He is, of course, the other very significant player. Who was Boaz? How was he related? So as we hear, it was from Elimelech's side. Remember, Elimelech came from very illustrious lineage. He's from the tribe of Judah, of Yehuda, but he's not just one of the many people from the tribe. He's from the most noble family. Well, Elimelech had 2 brothers. This is all very important in the storyline. Elimelech, Tuv, and a 3rd brother, Elimelech, Tuv, and Salmon. Salmon had a son named Boaz. Now, at this moment, and I'm going to review the storyline of the lineage because it's very important to understand what's going to unfold. Elimelech's gone, Machlon's gone, Chilion's gone. Naomi seemingly doesn't have any relatives that are around to help them. But there's one relative who has a lot of money and a lot of power. He's actually Naomi's nephew by marriage. He was Elimelech's brother's son. Boaz. That's a very close relative, especially when you see there's no big families here. So Elimelech has 2 brothers. The brother Solomon passed away. He has a living brother, Tuv, and he has a nephew, Boaz. Boaz wasn't just some little schlepper. Boaz was actually the leader of the Jewish people. He was the shofet. He was the judge. So that meant he was spiritually considered the greatest Jew in the country. He was also, as the verse says, very wealthy. He was obviously a very good person. And it's Naomi's nephew. We don't see him helping at all. Here they come, totally impoverished. There's 2 relatives, both of whom had money. Tuv, Elimelech's brother, Naomi's brother-in-law, and Boaz, Elimelech and Naomi's nephew. Neither of them stepped forward. Everybody in the town is talking about them. Everyone knows what happens, and nobody, we don't see either Boaz or Tuv surfacing to help. So you can look at this from a lot of perspectives. One is you can say, wow, look at Naomi's moral caliber. Here they have no food. I mean, literally, Ruth, the princess, who grew up as a princess and then married a very wealthy man. And now she's like the poorest beggar going to the fields to gather the sheaves that were left behind. Literally gathering like the poorest of the poor for her and Naomi's substance. Naomi seemingly could have gone to Tuv, her brother-in-law, or Boaz, her nephew, some help. She doesn't. She doesn't. No. We abandoned the people. We left. We were protecting ourselves and our money, and we weren't there for our brethren. I'm not going to go ask them for help. So I think that shows something about Naomi's character that was quite special. You see that Ruth steps up to the plate and says, okay, we have nothing. I'll go and gather the food. I don't want you to have to do that. For you, it's more embarrassing. You know these people. For you, it's harder. You're older. I mean, never mind, she was a princess who obviously wasn't used to this type of labor, but she was doing it, which shows her character. So the question is, all right, we see how Naomi is so amazing and Ruth is so amazing, but what's with Boaz and Tuv? Why did they come forth and help these two women that so desperately needed help? So it's questionable. Tuv, we don't know. We see later he doesn't emerge as such a great guy. So maybe he wasn't such a great guy, and that's why he didn't step forward. But Boaz was a leader of the Jews. Boaz was a tzaddik. He was a very holy Jew. He was a very knowledgeable Jew. He was a very good Jew. He was the highest caliber Jew of the country. He was the spiritual leader of his generation. Why wasn't he nice to his poor aunt who returned after 10 years with nothing? Some say because she came back with Ruth. And like many of the Jews, he wasn't sure how to digest that. So he sort of kept his distance until he understood what the correct law was. Others say no. I mean, obviously, Ruth was a Jew, and whatever the backstory of a Moabite convert, she's a Jew, and that wouldn't have stopped him. And as we see, he's very gracious to Ruth when he sees her in the fields. But actually, Boaz himself was just suffered a tragedy. It says the same day that Ruth and Naomi come to Beis Lechem, Boaz buried his wife in Beis Lechem. Boaz's wife had just passed away. So normally maybe he would have made the overtures and gone and given them greetings and support and something to get them on their feet, but he was actually dealing with his own situation. And afterwards he just said, well, Naomi didn't come to me. I guess she doesn't want that, and I'm not going to go where I'm not wanted, where I guess Naomi's feeling, no, I have too much pride or self-respect to want to ask, so I'll respect that. And as we see, he does do what he can to help in a much more discreet fashion. Now, I'm just going to read, just because I want to get to a certain point today in the story that will continue from next week to really understand what's this whole Moabite situation? How was the Moabite viewed? Why was she viewed as different? Was she different? We're going to start that next week. So I just want to get to that point in the verses very quickly. Ruth the Moabite, interesting, the scripture, the Tanakh keeps repeating, she's not just Ruth, she's a Jew, but she's the Moabite. That's very important in the storyline. Said to Naomi, let me go out in the field and glean among the ears of grain behind someone in whose eyes I shall find favor. Go ahead, my daughter, she said to her. So what Ruth was saying was, I mean, what's the law? We have nothing. We're like the poorest of the poor. We're going to go out. Right now is the harvest. And the law is that as they're harvesting, the poor can come and gather what the harvesters didn't take. It's actually very interesting. Today's Chumash portion mentions those laws. I thought that was an interesting tie-in that we're learning it now when it's actually literally the portion of today's Chumash. And again, Ruth was saying, I don't want you to do this. For you, it's so much more demeaning. It'll be so much more painful. I'm going to do this for us. And Naomi probably was like, oh my gosh, this is the greeting and welcome, the Baruch haba to someone who just fervently is sticking to the fold of the Jewish people. And I'm going to tell her, go and gather like the beggars. But what choice do I have? Okay, that's what God wants for us now. So off she went. She came and gleaned in the field behind the harvesters, and her fate made her happen upon a parcel of land belonging to Boaz, who was of the family of Elimelech. There's nothing that's random. Again, a very strong theme you see from this is there's no random. She happened, it wasn't her plan, and Naomi didn't tell her where to go, and it wasn't Naomi's plan. And there's different commentators that explain it in different ways. Some say she went to one field and she didn't feel comfortable. The people didn't seem to be of the right moral caliber. So she went to another field, and also for various reasons she left and she went to another field. And then she finally came, like, it's too cold, it's too hot, it doesn't fit right. She finally came to the field she felt comfortable. God said, I brought you here. This is Boaz's land. According to others, no. Boaz's land was right there, and she just left where she and Naomi were on their land. And what was the land next to them? Boaz's land. So she went to Boaz's land. So I don't know which way it happened. Obviously, both are true. In spiritually, they all explanations are all true. Our minds might not see how they work together, but they actually all do. We're just not wise enough to see. But a bit of this and a bit of that, she landed in Boaz's land. And she starts gleaning. But she gleaned very differently than anyone else. She was behind the people. Most of the people there are male beggars. She was like, that doesn't feel so comfortable. That doesn't feel proper. I'm going to be separate. I don't want to be with all those men. That was already different because all the other women were just there among all the beggars, who mostly were men. And she also behaved differently than all of them, because most of them, they lifted up their skirts to be able to, grab this and that and not get caught on all that doesn't seem so what God wants. I'm not lifting my skirts, even though I can see why they're going to get really ruined and caught on all the brambles, but I'm keeping my skirts down. So right away, she looked different than all the other women. But even how she gleaned was different, because you either have reached up or reached down. And she said when she was reaching up, she stood so she could reach, extend, take, and not lift up her arm in a way that would be immodest. She had to go down. She went all the way down and sat and gathered, so she wouldn't be bending down in a way that would probably not be perfectly modest. So here you have this woman. Can you imagine this? She's never in her life done such physical labor. She's never in her life been such a beggar. And what's on her head? Not, why did this happen to me? God, how are you rewarding me for my self-sacrifice in joining your flock? God, why are you doing this to me? You took my husband. You never gave me a child. You stripped us of every penny. I'm literally a beggar. None of that's in her head. What's in her head? Sure, whatever position I'm in, I'm modest. I'm not going to be like the natives. I see they pick up their skirts and their sleeves fall like this, and their skirts go like this, and their this goes like this, and their this goes like this. How can I logistically get the sheaves and maintain my absolute modesty the entire time? That was in her head. That was her overarching thought. Not, I'm so embarrassed. Not, this sun is beating down on me. Not, my back and my arms are breaking from this physical work that I'm totally unaccustomed to. That wasn't what was her focal point, but it was all there. Her focal point was, how do I maintain my modesty and dignity, no matter what position I have to be in to gather these sheaves? And therefore, she looked different than everyone else. And therefore, Boaz noticed her. And therefore, the story of God continues, of course, ultimately to their marriage and ultimately to the child that's going to be ultimately leading to David, ultimately leading to the Redeemer. I think it's just a very beautiful point. I'll end here on this idea of, obviously, Ruth was a very special woman in many ways. It wasn't random that she's the mother of David and Mashiach. But the virtue that we're told about, the point that's brought out that Boaz noticed of her specialness, that propelled the story along, the point that was so remarkable was her modesty. Incredible lesson. I'm sure she was brilliant. I'm sure she had so many virtues. You can see, obviously, she's so generous and kind to her mother-in-law, so loyal. But the virtue was her modesty. And I think it's just an amazing thing for us to think about. Maybe it should inspire me inward and not just be words, but just that we're really, when we're told this is the woman who was the ancestor of David and Mashiach, and what did she stand for? Modesty. That's that ultimate virtue that, of course, you can't say every Jewish woman has, because obviously the other women she was looking at were also Jewish and they weren't being modest in their hard situations and weren't thinking about that. They were thinking about gathering these sheaves while she was thinking about modesty. Powerful takeaway point. We will stop here. Next week, we're going to begin by discussing what's this Moabite issue? Why is that so significant in understanding what happens next? Thank you.